I left the house before dawn. Not a sound, not a door creak. Just the gentle groan of the old floorboards under my shoes and the quiet zip of my duffel. I didn't take much. A few clothes, the box of letters Grandpa Ben once gave me, and my name, whatever was left of it. No one asked where I was going. No one stood at the window. No one called the next day. Or the next. I waited in a way. Not for them to chase me. Just for a sign that someone had noticed. That anyone had looked into my room and found it hollow. But silence isn't always absence. Sometimes it's confirmation. 3 months passed, and then my phone buzzed with a message from my father, Frank Walker. His name alone used to give me a chill, even though he never yelled. He didn't need to. The message was short. Christmas, or no more tuition. I read it twice. Then, once more slower this time, as if I'd misread it. Tuition. 3 years ago, I'd graduated. Diploma in hand job lined up moved 2 states away. I hadn't needed a cent since, but he didn't know that. That's how far removed he was, how detached they all had been even before I left. Frank and Linda Walker. My parents still thought they held strings that had long since rotted through. That text wasn't a question. It was a warning, a bark from a father who hadn't called in over a year, not for my birthday, not when I moved, not when I got promoted, and yet here he was, threatening to pull a rope he never tied. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say. I was the youngest of 5. That's usually the spot people imagine comes with perks, more attention, more protection, more freedom. In my case, it meant silence. 7 years separated me from my closest sibling. By the time I was 10, my brothers and sisters had already claimed every seat at the table, each one weighed down with something heavy enough to draw my parents' gaze. Mark, the oldest, was already in therapy after a breakdown at 15. Jessica had lupus. Elena battled depression, the kind that turned family dinners into minefields. And Tom, 2 years ahead of me, was diagnosed with early onset bipolar disorder when I was still in elementary school. My parents, Frank and Linda Walker, weren't cruel. They didn't yell or hit, but they were always somewhere else, rushing between hospitals, school counselors, support groups. Their calendars were dotted with appointments I didn't need. I never had the flu more than twice. I didn't struggle in school. I didn't scream or cry or cut myself or fail math. I was fine, which in that house meant I was invisible. There was one memory, small, but it stuck. I was 16 and the first snow of the year had just hit. Grace and Lily, my 2 closest friends, had invited me on a winter retreat through our local youth center. I'd saved up for it all fall-bagged groceries after school skipped lunch twice a week to stash the cash. 2 days before we left, Mom came into my room. She didn't knock. "You'll have to cancel," she said. "Your cousin's family is visiting. We need the room." There wasn't an apology, just a statement. I remember looking at the wall behind her, not even at her face. That's where the map of Colorado hung, where I had circled our retreat spot in red. She never asked what the map was for. I didn't argue. I never did. That night I slipped out of the house, walked 3 blocks through the snow to Grandpa's place. Ben Walker was my dad's father, a man of few words and exact change. He opened the door without surprise, just stepped aside and let me in. We sat in his kitchen, orange Formica counters, old coffee pot humming. "You look like you lost something," he said. "I did," I replied, "but I knew I would." He didn't say anything after that. Just pulled open the silver bread tin he kept under the sink and peeled out 2 $20 bills, slid them across the table toward me without a word. "For next time," he said. "There won't be one," I told him, "then use it for boots." It was the first time I felt seen, and the last time I saw him alive. After I left home, I didn't move into a new place, I moved into a new rhythm. Grace Miller and Lily Chin, the only 2 people who had ever really felt like family, met me when we were 9. Like me, they were background children girls whose parents didn't hit or yell, but somehow still forgot to pack lunch or pick them up from school. We never talked much about it. We didn't need to. Now we shared a small rental just outside Denver, peeling paint-thin walls, but it was ours. We turned the second bedroom into a shared workspace, ran a small print and design business from scratch. Bills were tight. Sleep was rare. But for the first time, life felt like something I had built with my own hands. My parents didn't call. They hadn't even asked for my new address. Every so often, Linda, my mother, would send a vague text, "How's work?" Any plans for the holidays, I answered when I had the energy. Usually, I didn't. Then a week before Thanksgiving, she called. Not text, called. I remember staring at the name on my screen for a long time, wondering if something had happened. The last time she called was when Jessica passed cancer, finally taking the place lupus had worn down. I picked up. She skipped greetings. "What time are you arriving for Thanksgiving?" I blinked. I didn't know we were having Thanksgiving. We never really celebrated it growing up. Maybe 2 or 3 half-hearted attempts over the years. Cold turkey, boxed mashed potatoes. Dad would eat, then disappear into the garage. The rest of us would clear plates in silence. "Well, we are," she said, "and I need you here. Your father's taking Mark to the Mayo Clinic. I'll be alone." I had plans. Grace, Lily, and I had been prepping for a ski weekend since August. We'd already paid for the rental packed gear. We even made playlists. There were no refunds. I told her that. She paused. Then came the voice I remembered from 16. "So you're choosing a vacation over your mother?" I said nothing. Silence filled the line like steam off a pot left too long. Then she hung up. No text, no follow-up, just air. I felt something stir. Guilt, maybe. But then I remembered she never invited me. She never asked if I could come. She just assumed. As if I lived in her back pocket ready to unfold whenever needed. As if I'd never really left. A few days after the Thanksgiving call, I got a message from Frank, my father. It was late, nearly midnight. I had just finished folding laundry, thinking maybe I could finally sleep without that edge in my chest. The phone buzzed once. "If you don't come home for Christmas, I'm cutting off your college payments." I actually laughed, out loud. It wasn't a cruel laugh, more like the kind that slips out when reality folds in on itself. I graduated 3 years ago. I stared at the screen, waiting for a second message to follow. Nothing came. Just that one cold, misinformed threat, like a ghost shouting into a hallway long emptied. I texted back, "I graduated in 2022, Dad. Check your account. If someone's taking your money, it isn't me." Still nothing, but the absurdity of it wouldn't let go. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the tin box I kept there. Inside were letters, old ones from Grandpa Ben, along with a few check stubs I'd kept for no real reason. The first one, dated September of my freshman year, was made out to my school's bursar office. The memo line read, "Tuition. For Rachel. Do not involve Frank or Linda." I remember standing there in the hallway holding that paper like it had just been written. My throat tightened. He never told them. All 4 years' tuition books fees, he paid it all. Quietly. Cleanly. Because he knew. He saw. At the bottom of the final letter, there was a handwritten note. "They're too busy keeping everything else from falling apart. You don't ask for much. That's why I want you to have this." I sat on the floor and didn't move for a while. Frank had tried to use something he never gave me to manipulate me back, and he hadn't even known it wasn't his to give. In their minds, they had funded my future. In reality, they hadn't even noticed who did. The envelope was thick and official-looking. It arrived by courier on a Tuesday morning, no return address, no warning. I signed for it in my pajama pants, thinking maybe it was a tax document or some banking form I'd forgotten about. But the seal on the front said Jefferson County Probate Court. I opened it at the kitchen table next to a half-drunk cup of cold coffee and Grace's empty cereal bowl. The words hit one at a time, dull and heavy. Petition for temporary guardianship. Ethan Walker. Proposed, guardian Rachel Walker. Petitioning party Mark Walker. I didn't understand at first. I read it again. Slower. Then I turned the page and it sank in. They were trying to hand Ethan to me. Legally. Permanently. No phone call, no conversation. Just a document filled and filed as if I were a checkbox they'd finally gotten around to ticking. I stared at Mark's signature for a long time. Sharp. Confident. Like he hadn't hesitated. My phone was in my hand before I realized it. "Mark. Are you serious?" he called back within minutes. "No greeting. I figured you'd call." You filed a guardianship petition. You didn't think to ask me first. It's not like we have a line of volunteers, Rachel. You're the only one with a job, a stable place. No complications. I almost laughed again. Almost. And you. What's your excuse? I've got 2 kids under 10. Elena's barely stable. Tom's an outpatient again. Jessica's gone. That leaves you. His voice wasn't cruel. It was matter of fact, like he was assigning me a chore. You're strong, he said. You've always been strong. No, I said. I've always been quiet. That's not the same thing. He didn't respond. I looked down at the papers again, legal lines and medical attachments assessments from Ethan's doctors, a copy of his educational plan. Everything neat. Everything decided. Without me. There was a page for me to sign at the end. I slid it back into the envelope. I could feel something rising in my chest, not rage, not even grief, just a sharpness. The kind that comes from being overlooked until it's convenient to be seen. You didn't call when I left, I said. You didn't call when I graduated or when Grandpa died. But now I'm suddenly the answer to all your mess. Still, he didn't say a word. I ended the call without goodbye. For a moment, I just sat there, the packet of paper between my fingers like a lead weight. It was never really about Ethan. It was about control, about shifting burden, about assuming I'd say yes because I always had. But this time, they'd made one mistake too many. She showed up on a Saturday. No warning, no text. Just a knock, 3 sharp taps on the front door that made Lily look up from the couch. I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought maybe it was a neighbor or a package. But when I pulled back the curtain, I saw her. Linda Walker, my mother. She looked older than I remembered, thinner. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her coat hung off her like it belonged to someone else. She wasn't crying. She didn't smile. She just stood there like she had every right to be. I didn't open the screen door. Rachel, she said, we need to talk. We really don't, I answered. She stepped forward, hand grazing the door handle. Please, just let me in. No. Whatever you came to say it here. For a second I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Disbelief, maybe. Or pride wounded in its old age. Your father's not well, she said. He's been in and out of the hospital. His heart. She trailed off as if letting me fill in the blanks would carry more weight. I didn't respond. We don't know how long he has. I'm scared, Rachel. I don't know what to do. There it was the card she'd been saving, the one she thought would break me. That's not mine to fix, I said. You're part of this family. I shook my head. I was convenient background until you ran out of louder children. And now you want to hand me the wreckage. Her jaw tightened. We did the best we could. I'd heard that line before. It never meant much. You had 5 kids. You chose which ones to carry. You chose which ones to see. I just learned how to walk on my own. She blinked hard. So that's it. You just walk away. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just held the door frame and said, You turned away first. I'm just walking now. She didn't answer, didn't argue. She just stood there a second longer, then turned and walked back to her car steps, slow, deliberate. I didn't watch her drive off. I just closed the door, slid the lock into place, and sat on the floor behind it. My hands opened my chest still. I found out by accident. It was a Thursday morning. I was scrolling through my phone in line at the grocery store, something to fill the silence between beeps of other people's lives being scanned. That's when I saw it. A local obituary. Franklin J. Walker, 64, survived by his wife, 4 children, and 1 grandchild. There was no mention of me by name, no photo, just a line about a man who worked hard and loved quietly. I reread it twice, then again, slower. My hands went cold. No call. No message. No voice on the other end saying, You should come. He's gone. Nothing. Just this digital stone placed in the public square where anyone could see it except maybe the person who should have known first. Later that day, Mark texted, Dad passed yesterday. I figured you'd find out eventually. No apology. No invitation to the funeral, just a confirmation like weather. I didn't reply. I sat at the kitchen counter with my phone face down the screen, dark, as if it had nothing more to say. And maybe it didn't. His death wasn't a surprise. He'd been fading for years in health and in presence. But the silence around it, their choice to exclude me from even this, said more than any eulogy could. I wasn't mourning what we had. I was mourning what never was. The letter came a week after the obituary. Thick envelope, cream paper, letterhead law offices of Dalton and Myers. I sat with it unopened for almost an hour. Part of me already knew. I hadn't spoken to them in months, but they still found a way to drag me back this time from the grave. The appointment was scheduled for Friday afternoon. The office was quiet, the kind with soft carpet and walnut shelves meant to make grief feel like a transaction. The lawyer, Mr. Myers, was polite, mid-60s maybe. He didn't smile much. We sat across from each other at a long table. "Your father's will named you as executor," he said, "and primary guardian to Ethan Walker." I said nothing. "The house goes to you as well. 314 Ellsworth Lane. Full deed. No mortgage." He slid the document toward me. There were tabs where I was meant to initial like this was any other Form New lease car rental library card. I stared at the address. That house hadn't been mine in a long time. It was where I learned to tiptoe to disappear. And now it was being handed to me like a thank you card for a party I wasn't invited to. I asked the only thing that mattered. "Was Mark involved in this?" He nodded. He witnessed the signing. 3 months ago. Of course he did. They'd been planning it. While I was still answering one-word texts, while I was paying rent, running my own business building something away from them, they were still writing me into roles I never auditioned for. "Did they say why I asked?" He hesitated. "Only that you were consistent, reliable." I almost laughed. Quiet, obedient, invisible, all now rebranded as dependable. I looked through the rest of the documents. Somewhere near the end there was a clause, "Should Ethan's condition require full-time care, Rachel Walker shall act in loco parentis." No backup, no alternative, just me. Again. I placed the papers back on the table, pushed them gently toward Mr. Myers. "I won't be taking guardianship." He blinked. "You're declining." "Yes." "Formally. Fully. Find someone else. Someone who was actually in his life." He nodded slowly. "I'll make the note." As I stood, he reached for the papers. His hand trembled slightly. I wondered if he had children. I wondered if he'd ever made them carry what wasn't theirs. Outside, the air felt thinner, like I'd walked out of something I couldn't quite name. They'd passed me a house full of ghosts and a brother I barely knew because I hadn't broken, and I was done pretending that survival meant I owed them something. The email came 2 days after I left the law office. Subject line, "Please from Mark." It was short. No greeting. "I know you've made your decision. I get it, but Mom isn't doing well. Ethan needs someone. You're the only one who hasn't fallen apart. If there's any part of you that still cares even a little, please reconsider." I read it once, then again. The phrasing caught me, "hasn't fallen apart," as if stability were a sin, as if being whole meant I had to be the net beneath everyone else's crumbling. I left the email open on my laptop, walked away, sat on the porch until dusk. Lily brought me tea. Grace didn't ask. That's the thing about real family, they don't frame care as a debt. That night, I thought of Ethan. He'd always been gentle, never loud, never cruel. A quiet boy with sharp eyes, always watching. I didn't hate him, but love doesn't mean erasure, and pity doesn't equal consent. They had years to ask me if I'd be willing. They had moments, opportunities, but instead, they assigned me. And now, with my father buried and my mother unraveling, they reached out not because they saw me, but because there was no one else left standing. That isn't love. That's convenience. The next morning, I replied, "Just one line. I hope you find what he needs. But it won't be me." Then I archived the thread. Didn't block, didn't rage, just stepped back from the edge they wanted me to lean over. And I felt it in that small, quiet way freedom sometimes arrives, not like fireworks, but like the air finally exhaling. The old wooden box sat untouched for years, my grandfather's. Dark, cherry-finish brass latch initials carved by hand. It used to hold his medals too from Korea, one from a local bowling league. But after he passed, it came to me along with silence. I hadn't opened it since. That morning, with the sunlight low and nothing left to wait for, I did. Inside were a few photos him my dad me as a toddler on someone's shoulders I barely remembered. There was a folded letter with handwriting that wasn't mine, and under that, a checkbook stub with the last entry dated 15 years ago. Tuition Rachel's fall term, paid in full. His name signed clearly beneath it. They told me it was my mother. All those years. I closed the box gently, not from anger, not to make a point, but because I didn't need anything from it anymore. Not truth, not vindication. They had rewritten history so many times I almost believed them, that I was the cold one, the distant one, the daughter who turned her back. But I didn't walk away because I didn't care. I walked away because they never turned to face me in the first place. There's a difference. And now, after everything after the silence, the accusations, the final pleas, I finally understood I wasn't their backup plan. I was their blind spot, and I refused to keep living in their shadow. I placed the box back on the shelf. Not hidden, not framed. Just there. And I locked the door behind me, not with bitterness. Just the quiet knowing that sometimes the truest love you can offer yourself is leaving. I didn't walk away to be loved. I walked away so they'd never get to lie about me again.